Let's see. Oh, Paola Suar, this is your first time chatting, so welcome to the community. What's your intake on autonomous weapons? Do you think they should be regulated or banned? Ooh, that's a big question. So I wrote a paper on this on my master's. Um, I would say, um, given the state of technology right now, I would probably like it if this technology were simply not available, but I guess that is not realistic, particularly because the arguments that are going to be made about how to regulate autonomous weapons. And so there will always be this argument of if I don't build it, someone else will. So if I don't make an autonomous weapon system, China will. And the thing is, there comes a point in the autonomous weapon. So just so people who don't know, autonomous weapons are weapons that can pick a target and decide to shoot on their own. So they're not automatic in the sense that, for example, the Iron Dome is automatic. You tell them this is what a missile looks like. You shoot the missile and you destroy the missile. You intercept it. Done. That's the only thing that they can that machine can do. But it cannot decide, for example, oh, there's something that is not one of these like rockets that comes out of Gaza. I'm gonna shoot it as well on its own. It cannot. It's basically like a high tech blender. It has one function. You turn it on and it blends. You turn it on and it intercepts missiles. It doesn't have decision making power. So HMC 1111 says autonomous weapons are based. I find them terrifying. So um, you see, the argument for autonomous weapons is that they don't get scared, they don't get angry, they don't get hateful, and so they would theoretically be able to comply with the rules of war more better, I guess, than humans. Because humans can hate, humans can get scared, humans can mistake a kid for a combatant or whatever, right? Um, I don't think that this is really a good argument because um, at some point, you need to acknowledge that the rules of war are very subjective. They are very, very, very subjective. So, who is a combatant and who is a civilian is not a question that you can like program it with ones and zeros, right? So, essentially, you have rules for this is who a combatant is, and to a degree, anyone who doesn't fit into that definition is a civilian. If that is the definition of a civilian, um, then at one point you have to, for example, decide that a civilian is someone who's not participating in hostilities. And participation in hostilities requires intent. Requires intent. Right? So if you need to determine intent with ones and zeros, you really cannot do that. You really cannot like program a proportionality and distinction analysis into a computer. I mean, you can do something that approximates it. We do it with the collateral damage estimate softwares, which are softwares that, they put you put a model of the house that you want to target or the objective that you want to target. You pinpoint the type of weapon, the angle, the altitude of detonation, and determine, oh, if we shoot this missile in this way, we're gonna cause 30 civilian casualties, and I don't know, let's say like 45, combatant casualties. Oh, okay, so done. Let's do it. That is not a proportionality analysis. That is just a casualty estimation, right? So a proportionality analysis would need you to evaluate the proportion between the two, and that is just something that I don't think a machine can do. So I'm not sure we can program compliance with the laws of war like this for a machine to do. Now, because of this, would I ban them? Like ideally, yes, but then also at the same time, you have this reality of states telling you, well, but if I don't build one, someone else will. So I cannot commit myself to not develop these weapons if someone else might develop them, if China might develop them. Because you get to a point where the way these machines work, at some point, the reaction time is faster than a human. So you can design a machine that designs a machine that is able to shoot at your soldiers faster that they can shoot back. So you would need a machine that is able to anticipate the reaction time of that machine. So a machine that builds a machine that builds a machine that attacks the other machine. So it starts to get into this like terrifying territory of like almost like Captain America Winter Soldier? No, Captain America Civil War? Is it? No. Which one is the one where there's an aircraft carrier that's going to start shooting people preventively? Um, I forgot the name, but that Captain America. You start getting into that territory, and states tell you, no, we need to be able to develop these weapons. And so what I would do is two things. On the one hand, an embargo, as in you can research it, but you cannot deploy these machines. And second, there are scenarios where the rules of war cannot be regulated. And so because of that, in those scenarios, those machines should be banned. In other scenarios, like say, for example, you develop a tank that is able to detect other tanks, and in tank warfare, in the middle of the desert, like in large tank battles, you tell that tank you can shoot other tanks. I think it's very difficult for a machine to confuse a tank with a pickup truck or a child with a toy gun for a tank. So in those scenarios, I feel like, yeah, sure, that is a type of scenario where I would say maybe that's something that we can yield. We can say, okay, in that scenario, maybe there's the possibility of a valid use of autonomous weapons. But as things are right now, with the rules of war as they are and technology as it is, in 90% of the cases, then these autonomous weapons cannot actually comply with the rules of war, because the rules of war are subjective. They're not objective. You cannot program them with ones and zeros. And therefore, I would embargo them for now and say you cannot deployment. You can research if you want, but you cannot deploy them. And even when we get to a point where technology starts to improve, I would say let's measure in which types of battlefields do you deploy them. So for example, right now there are these like autonomous machine guns that Israel has. Actually, Israel has these machine guns placed on top of like checkpoints. North Korea and South Korea, I think South Korea has them in the DMZ with North Korea. And what they do is they can determine that there's a human there, and they will issue a message saying, stop and raise your hands, or something like that. And so you stop and raise your hands, and when you do that, the machine will scan you. And if it determines that you're not a threat, if it determines that you're not a threat, then it doesn't shoot. But if you start running, it shoots at you. Like that is a very basic set of commands. That is true. It's like, is there a human and is he running, or are they running? But at the same time, it is still already a lot to ask of a machine to determine the intent of raising your hands, right? So I would not have those weapons. And there's a million variations of them. That there's autonomous weapons that you just launch as a drone. They stay loitering in the sky, and eventually, whenever they detect a, I don't know, and air defense, or when they detect a radar, they just launch against the radar. We can discuss what uses would comply with IHL, but say for example in that case, can you really determine that when that machine is going to dive against that radar, that radar is going to that attack is going to comply with proportionality? I think it's very difficult. If there are people inside, can the machine actually detect the military advantage? So I'm on the skeptic side of things, but I wouldn't just say. I understand why the logic is ban them as a political strategy. You go for a ban and then you get something else. But I don't think that states are just going to say, "Oh, okay, we're going to ban them." I think it's more reasonable to say embargo them for now, and let's see in what scenarios can you actually use these things and in what scenarios you can't. But it makes perfect sense for NGOs like Human Rights Watch or Amnesty International to just start as a position with a no, let's ban them. They suck, because they really do suck, right? HMC says the idea of warfare that we should be moving towards is one in which humans aren't involved at all, and it's just robots fighting robots. Is it though? Because this is perhaps me being a little bit idealistic, but I think it's important to be idealistic from time to time. I think the idea of warfare that we should be moving towards is not having war, not making war so technologically advanced that we cannot even, fight back. Like this dream warfare where there will always be robots fighting robots, and then whenever you destroy enough robots, then that's it, because you cannot simply win a war against a robot because, say, the robot shoots faster than a human. That scenario is never going to exist, because this actually happened so in the 1800s, in the early 1800s, Napoleon was fighting a type of war where you moved your armies to the battlefield, and you encountered the other army, you advanced, shot, killed a bunch of people, then they advanced, shoot their weapons, kill a bunch of your people, then you keep on advancing until you meet in the battlefield, you grab the bayonets and you hack at each other. And the idea was only soldiers will fight. Civilians will not be involved. But that was the general idea, that war is a sport of noblemen that try to defeat each other through wit, logic, and like honor codes. And civilians would just be there, and they should just stay home and let the armies fight. And then came Clausewitz, right? Clausewitz said, "This is silly. Why are we doing this? What is this idea that if you march your troops up until a specific part of the battlefield, um, then the other army will say, "Oh, we're defeated. You conquered our capital. We're done. This is done. We're gonna surrender now." Because Clausewitz lived at a time where nationalism was like beginning to take hold. Right. So when an army defeated another one, Napoleon invaded Spain and defeated the Spanish armies that basically fled. Not a very big war, not a very long war, and he conquered Spain. And yet, because of this new invention of nationalism, Spanish people refused to simply be conquered. They started to attack Napoleon's forces from vantage positions as civilians without uniform, hiding in the rubble. And they called this a small war. Small wars were code for colonial wars, the kinds of wars that states fought in Africa and South America. And they called it a small war in Spanish. In Spanish, small war is guerrilla, from war, guerra. And that's how guerrilla warfare started, when people refused to stop fighting because their armies had been defeated, right? So this idea that only soldiers will fight the war and civilians will be spared failed already, because people will always want, especially people that exist in nationalism as of the 1800s, will always want, there will always be enough people wanting to fight for the idea, for nationalism. So this idea where you're going to have a bunch of robots fighting each other, and once you destroy the other party's robots, no one is going to fight, because it will be ludicrous to go up against a robot that can shoot you 70 times before you can even notice that the robot is there, and therefore you're defeated, and therefore the war is over and no humans die. Again, forgets the fact that we exist in a post-nationalist world where it's not like, oh, okay, there are no more robots, so we will surrender, and then, I don't know, the United States will stop existing because Russia has more robots, and let's do away with the idea of America, and let's just talk Russian from now on, and let's, swear allegiance to Putin. That's not how humans work. People will always continue to revolt. And so now these horrible machines that were designed to kill other machines will be used to kill humans in even more horrendous ways. So I don't think this dream world HMC is going to ever happen. I think these machines that you're designing to humanize war will only come back and bite us in the butt, and will be used to decimate entire populations and likely commit huge genocides against people that refused to surrender. There's this very good line at the beginning of this movie Gladiator, Russell Crowe's Gladiator, not the Gladiator 2 that just came out, which I refuse to watch. It starts when Maximus, the gladiator, Maximus, the star of the movie, is conquering Germania. And he looks at his general and sees the advancing Germanic quote-unquote barbarians making a last stand. And you can see they're outnumbered, you can see that they're going to lose. And his general looks at Maximus and says, people should know when they're conquered. And Maximus turns around to his general and says, would you, Quintus? Would I? And of course, the logic is no, I would fight tooth and nail to the last man. Clausewitz. That's what will happen. So this idea that, war is going to be fought by robots, I just don't think is going to work out. HMC says, people will keep fighting after their army has been defeated if they think they can actually succeed. If they don't, then they won't. I don't think you've seen enough sci-fi movies, man. I don't think you should watch Terminator again. we have grown up with this idea that you should fight the Terminator, right? That you should even go back in time to stop the Terminator. The power of nationalism is way too big. And I mean, I'm not a particularly big nationalist, but I acknowledge its existence. So I actually, I'm not convinced by your idea that if we develop machines that are terrible enough, nationalism will go away. I don't think so. People will eventually find ways to destroy the machines. Yes, eventually they will find Jeff Goldblum, who will design a virus to attack the aliens. Isn't that the message of every single movie that we've seen in sci-fi? Like when the odds are insurmountable, your wit is going to make you win the war. So yeah, I'm sorry, I don't see it, HMC. Well, that says I'm a Terminator girl. Yeah, definitely. Terminator is awesome.